Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first of the League of Women Voters 2022 Fall Lunch and Learn programs. And I hate to say fall because I really didn't want summer to end. I'm Robin Schmidt, President of the League of Women Voters of the La Crosse area. Thank you for joining us today. And on behalf of the League of Women Voters of the La Crosse Area Board, we are excited to have you here today and to hear from our election officials, Nikki Elson, at the City of La Crosse Clerk, and Fortune Weaver, the Town of Shelby Clerk, about the ins and outs of this fall election. The La Crosse area tends to have a higher than average voter participation, and many anticipate that this fall's election will continue with that trend. Voter participation is at the core of the League's mission, and we hope that this program clarifies the questions you may have with respect to the voting process. As for the logistics of today's presentation, as with similar programs we've had in the past, we ask that you type your questions for the speakers into the question and answer box at the bottom of your screen. And when both speakers have completed their presentations, then we will have time to ask questions, and we will do that at the conclusion of their talks. The League of Women Voters, a nonpartisan political organization, encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in government, works to increase our understanding of major public policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. Chris Haskell is chair of our Voter Services Committee, and she's going to share with us information about various voter services activities that are going on in our community that her committee is leading, and is also going to provide us with a brief overview of how to find voter information on our website. She's also going to help debut a new voting campaign featuring some special hometown stars who say, "I vote, do you?" So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Chris for her presentation, and she will also introduce our speakers when she's done. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. I'm always happy to talk about the work of the Voter Services Committee. We are a volunteer force of 27 and growing. We're getting new interest all the time. What do our volunteers do? They sit in hours of committee meetings. They put up the Everyone Vote signs all over the area. They do tabling at multiple events and presentations. Let me just tell you a little bit about what we've been doing as the November 8th election gets closer. We have relationships with all three of our post-secondary schools, and we have leaders on our committee that create and maintain these relationships with us. So we have done one tabling event at Viterbo. We've done one at Western with 2 more scheduled. We've done 2 at UWL with 1 more scheduled. And we also have things in the planning for all 3 of those post-secondary schools, which of course have a very important demographic of people who have come to our town and need to register. We also do community events. We were at Pride in the Park on Saturday, and that was a terrific event for us. We'll be at the public library on National Voter Registration Day, which is the 20th, and we'll be at Hmong New Year on the 24th. And we do presentations. We will be going into the La Crosse jail on the 29th of the month. This will be our 3rd semester working in a class with the inmates in the jail, mostly to give them information about their voting rights, but also we do some registering. And we will be speaking with the UWL Student Senate and talking to the leaders of UWL about the League of Women Voters. And finally, we have a strong relationship with the folks in our community with disabilities. And I just did a presentation at Active that I'll tell you a little bit more about later. So that's some of the work that we do. One of our really important things that we do also is to have a terrific website and extremely strong social media presence. LWV La Crosse, please come and watch us and join us. Right now, Robin is going to show us the website, and I'll talk a little bit about the information there. So you can see this is the home page of our website, and there are tabs across the top in the blue. Robin's going to highlight the events programs. Oh, sorry. No, you were right. Engage on issues. Sorry. Thanks, Robin. We just practiced this, but apparently. Anyway, you can see the various tabs there. You can get more information. Our wonderful website grew. I'm apparently having trouble talking today. We thank Nora Garland for all the incredible work she does on our website. So if you just want to highlight, let's say, environmental issues, Robin. So you can see, if you scroll down on this page, you can find articles, videos about various environmental issues. And it's the same for all the topics under Engage on Issues. Okay, let's go to the voting tab, please, Robin. And again, you can see that you can link on many things there. If you and or your friends or your Aunt Sally needs information about voting, it can all be found here. The registration is very, very thorough. For example, the 3 different voting options and special voting populations. This gives you an idea, and there's several live links on that particular part of our website. So it's really a tremendous resource of voting and other issue information. We're encouraging everyone to consider the very rewarding work of being a poll worker. Talk about really knowing what's going on in elections. Sign up to be a poll worker, and you will understand how our elections are run right on the ground as you're there watching people coming in and voting. One of the things that I didn't mention that we're very excited about for this particular election, we have a relationship with Johnny and Jordan Davis, the phenoms of basketball, who are collaborating with us and getting out the vote. We're pushing out this particular phenomena, these particular phenomenons now. We're contacting our local media, so hopefully you'll be seeing a bunch about this collaboration later in the year. But before the election, we're also collaborating with Joan Wilson, who's the owner of the Mocha Coffee Shops, and we'll tell you more about that as that gets closer. But to give a little, this is something that not very many people have seen, so feel like you're very special to watch the PSA that we'll be sending out to local TV channels and putting on our social media. So here's Johnny and Jordan Davis. Whoop, we can't hear that volume.
Sorry, I had to unmute.
I'm Johnny. I'm Jordan. We're brothers, but we're also a winning team. Basketball is a team sport. You can score a lot of points, but it takes a real team to win. Join a winning team. Go out and vote. I do. Do you? Voting. It's a slam dunk. I'm Johnny. I'm Jordan.
So you can see from that PSA that the Davis brothers are interested in more than just basketball. We're very grateful to them that they were willing to give up their very valuable time to come to La Crosse, and we're especially grateful to Jim Jordan, who filmed that PSA for us. And as I said, hopefully this will encourage a lot of people to stop and think, oh, the Davis brothers are interested in voting. Maybe I should think about voting too. That's a demographic we're hoping to reach that maybe we haven't in the past. And our campaign will be further out in the community in addition to the Davis brothers. I want to tell you one other thing before I introduce our guest today. I mentioned that we do presentations, and I did a presentation to Active. Well, there's the excitement of all working with the Davis brothers and Mocha Coffee, and then there's just the small things that happen and we do on a regular basis. So I was doing a presentation at Active to 7 adults with disabilities, some of whom had obvious disabilities, 2 were in wheelchairs, and 1 was blind, and the others I wasn't really quite sure about. So we talked a little bit about what they valued and how what they value has a direct link with voting, because who you vote for can affect what happens to the things that you valued. And they mentioned things like families, hospital care, accessibility, local transportation. And then I asked them how many of them had already voted. Well, 4 of the 7 had already voted. I would say, and I think maybe our clerks could vouch for this, when you get 57% of any population that votes, that's a good number. So that I left there thinking, oh, defending democracy and empowering voters. That's what we do in the league. And there it was right in front of me. But we're volunteers. Let's turn it over to the people who do this as a living day after day, and to whom we are very grateful for. We're very pleased to have in our community both Nikki Ellison from the city of La Crosse and Fortune Weaver from the town of Shelby. So Nikki has been the city clerk just over a year, but we've known her for a long time. She has worked in the city clerk's office as the deputy clerk and or the city clerk, and been there for 22 years. And Fortune has been the town of clerk in Shelby since 2019. So as I said, we're grateful to have them out there and grateful to have them with us today for our lunch and learn. So I'll turn it over to Nikki.
I think Fortune was going to go first.
Then I'll turn it over to Fortune. Thank you.
Alrighty, so I'm going to share a PowerPoint. Kind of split up the material and talking points between Nikki and myself. So here we go.
Fortune, before you start, Mary, can you make sure that Fortune is spotlighted and not Nikki?
All right, ready to go. I've been having some issues with my internet today, but hopefully it holds out for us. So I'm going to be covering registering to vote and election observers. Just some kind of highlights of what you guys might need to know. So registering to vote, first and foremost, the qualifications to be a voter in the state of Wisconsin. You have to be 18 years of age, a US citizen, a resident of the town, city, or village for at least 28 days before election day. And you cannot be serving a sentence for a felony conviction such as parole, supervision, or probation. Then comes to actually registering. You can register by mail of I'll talk a little bit by mail or in person. You're gonna have to fill out a form. It looks a little daunting, but pretty much just step by step, providing your information to get you registered. That being said, you will be required to provide personal information such as your date of birth and your driver's license number. So keep that in mind when you are filling out these forms. You can always call your town clerk to see if it is an official form that's going to be coming to us or to, you know, the Wisconsin Elections Commission or anything like that, because third parties do send out forms to get people registered. It happens all the time, and unfortunately we can't do anything to stop it. So just try and pay attention a little bit to what you're filling out. If you don't have a driver's license number or an ID number, you have to provide the last 4 digits of your social security number. So again, you're providing your personal information and you need to be careful about that. And if you are going to register in person at your clerk's office, check with your local clerk for their hours of operation. I'm a smaller town, but we do still have the Monday through Friday, 8 to 4 hours. Your clerk, if you're in a small town, your clerk's office might not. I know sometimes they're like 3 to 6 on Wednesdays. It's so inconsistent with smaller towns. So just make sure you check on that. Final step, you'll be providing your documentation. You will have to prove your address when you register to vote. So you have to prove that the place where you're saying you've lived for 28 days, you have to prove that you live there. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. I also encourage voters to provide contact information to the town. I underlined town because, again, who are you giving this information to? Make sure that you know who you're giving that to. For the most part, we won't send out solicitations, but for the most part, we will contact you only when necessary, obviously. And the most common reason that I have to find people's phone numbers is because they leave their driver's license or passport at the polling place after they vote. They either don't put it in their pocket or something happens, they leave it in the voting booth, whatever. It happens every single election day that I have to find someone's information. And it's much easier to do that if I already have it from your voter registration, so I know it's the right number. So how can you prove your address? On the right side here, you will see that I have put the front and back of the Wisconsin voter registration application. Again, you're just providing all of your information to get you registered. But how do you prove that you live where you say you live? Well, I've blown up the section on the back here that shows you all of the acceptable documents that you can provide to your town clerk to prove that you do live there. Most obvious being driver's license or utility bill, but there's quite a few options. For those of you who are more visual, I have a little picture here of things that you could use. On the bottom here, you'll notice, I don't know if you can see my mouse moving around, that the proof of residence documents can be provided in electronic format. So if you have your Verizon bill PDF on your phone, you can use that, or your bank statement PDF on your phone, you can use that at the clerk's office in an electronic format. But try to remember that when you're at the polls and you have to show your ID to get your ballot, you cannot have a picture of it. It has to be the physical document. So that's kind of the difference there that you should note. All right, so now we're going to talk about election observers. Sorry if I'm going a little fast. So Wisconsin statute 7.41 is the right to public access. So that gives you the right as a member of the public to be present at any polling place, including the polling place on election day, the municipal clerk's office during in-person absentee voting, central count locations, and you can be present for recounts. You have the right, and I absolutely encourage people to go do that because like they were saying earlier, that's one of the best ways to learn is to be a poll worker or just to be in the environment and see what's happening. If there's a nursing home in your area, we don't have any nursing homes or special care facilities in Shelby. The people who are conducting voting or registration in those facilities, they are all specially trained. They're called special voting deputies, and they go through several hours of training to be able to provide these individuals with the ability to register to vote or to vote their ballot in a safe way. So we're very grateful to those people. But only people who are appointed by a political party can go observe that happening. I don't have a reason for that. That's just how it is right now. The media is an entirely different beast. They have a whole different set of rules they have to abide by. If you are from the media, you more than likely either already know about the rules, or you should be contacting the municipal clerk if you're planning to show up at a polling place. Basically, essentially, it comes down to the fact that they have cameras and recording equipment. So that's the main differences there. This looks a little daunting, but this is the brochure that we will give to election observers when they come to the polling place. It's called the Election Observers Rules at a Glance. I'm going to give you kind of the highlights of what it says in here, but for those of you who would be downloading this PowerPoint later, you can find this on the Wisconsin Elections Commission website, and it is useful for you to be able to see it. So I did include it in this PowerPoint. And then here's the other side of that. I do want to bring your attention to the internet address, the elections.wi.gov, and the email address below that. So if you have questions or concerns, you can either research the topic, or you can email them and then get an answer from the Wisconsin Elections Commission directly, if you would prefer to contact them instead of your municipal clerk, which you absolutely have the option to do. All right, so part one of the highlight reel. As an election observer, you have to identify yourself as such. You will sign in with the chief inspector, and typically you have to write your political, political party affiliation. You have to present a photo ID, and then you have to follow the rules of the polling place. So again, everyone in the public has a right to access to the polling place, but you have to follow the rules of the polling place. It's not a free pass to do whatever you want. You do have to sit within these limitations. Voting is conducted on election day from 7 a.m. until 8 p.m. You have the right to show up at 7 a.m. and sit there all day long. If people do that, and if you would like to do that, that is absolutely up to you. The only people who have restrictions on that are candidates who are on the ballot. Obviously, they can't just sit in the polling place. That would be inappropriate. So if they're voting, they can be there. Typically for me, I don't have any representatives aside from the town board members who live in my town. So I encourage them and their spouses to absentee vote when they are on the ballot. I think that's a more appropriate a way for them to behave on election day. After 8 p.m., it is a public meeting. So candidates and again, the public, whoever can be there after 8 p.m. and they can watch us take down tables, you can watch us shut down the machines. And again, we do encourage people to do that because that's how you learn. The chief inspector oversees the polling place. So observers can interact with only the chief inspector and the clerk unless a voter or poll worker interacts with them. Hey Joe, how are you doing? Oh, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for asking. How are you? Great. And that's about as far as we typically let it get. Friendly conversation, unless it's started by someone else, you just have to sit there and observe. Observers can view documents such as the poll book if time allows, and it cannot interrupt the process of voting, and that is up to the chief's discretion. So if it is a ghost town and there is time available, you can go up and look at the poll book to see who has already voted. You cannot touch the poll book at all. And if the chief says, hey, we don't have time for that, we're doing things, that's just how it is. It's the chief's discretion. If their polling place to run, and if they feel that it's going to interrupt something that they're doing, a task they're trying to complete, then they won't let you do that. So highlight reel part 2. Here are things that typically election observers are not allowed to do. So you cannot view registration forms, proof of address, documentation, or observer logs on election day. You can make a Freedom of Information request after the election day if you would like, and that information can be provided to you, but on the day of, It is not an option. We have other things to do. You cannot at any time view confidential voter information. That obviously confidential voter, it is not for the public's eyes. So that's just kind of a given there. You cannot take photos or videos. Obviously, like I mentioned earlier, media has different set of rules, but for the general election observer, photos and videos are not appropriate, and that would be an issue for the chief inspector, and they would probably ask you to leave it that way. You cannot handle any official documents. Again, I hope that's kind of a given. Best rule is kind of one, if your grandma ever told you, you look with your eyes, not your hands. That's typically how we manage the polling place. You cannot converse regarding a question on the ballot or about a specific candidate. You cannot do that with the chief inspector. You cannot do that with myself. You cannot do that with anyone else. You can't do that with other election observers. It's not appropriate for any reason at the polling place. You cannot make or take phone calls. If you're just texting or scrolling on Facebook, that is typically fine. But making or taking phone calls is considered disruptive and you'll be asked to leave. You cannot wander about the polling place. There is a designated area for election observers, and they will be asked to stay there unless they're using the restroom or running out to their car, something of that nature. Obviously, you'd be able to, but typically you can't just wander about. The polling place is set up so that the election observers are between 3 and 8 feet from the poll book. The main reason for this is so that you can hear when someone announces their name and address. The fact that you're voting is not confidential information. How you voted is not public. So just keep that in mind. You cannot wear buttons or clothing in favor or against a candidate on the ballot or in reference to a specific party. Most of these things really should be a given. If you come in to observe and you are wearing any sort of piece of clothing that says, this person's great, or I'm a whatever, no. You pretty much got yourself kicked out before you even started observing the election. We will not tolerate that. It's inappropriate, and it's not something that should be done. There's a little bit of everything here says some form of electioneering, in my opinion. You cannot engage in electioneering, which is an activity that is intended to influence the voting at the election. Again, I think that all the bullet points above this were basically saying what electioneering is in any certain form. But again, if you have any questions about that, I did put the statute there so you can look that up or ask questions to your local representatives or clerks. Part 3 is the last part of the highlight reel. It was a lot of information, sorry. So in summary, you have the right to public access. Per Wisconsin statute, you do not have the right to disrupt a polling place. Typically, there's a zero tolerance policy for that. Well, in my case, zero tolerance. Your chief inspector can dismiss you for any reason at any time. So if you are causing an issue, even if you don't think it's an issue, if the chief inspector thinks it's an issue, they are the authority of the polling place and they can ask you to leave. And for the most part, they absolutely will, because at the end of the day, we're all just trying to do our job. We don't have time to babysit full-grown adults who want to, do whatever they got to do. We want to keep our place peaceful, and we've gone through the training to run free and fair elections, and we don't have time for anything else on election day besides the election. So if you're causing a problem, you're done. It's not baseball. One strike, you're out. Okay. Again, no warnings, basically, is what I just said. When you're handed the election observer rules at a glance, that is your one and only warning of how to behave in the polling place. And typically, if somebody is doing something wrong, they know. Most election observers are told to come by a political party or by a group of people
I note that Fortune indicated she was having some internet issues at their town hall. So why don't we just give it another minute and hopefully she'll come back. Otherwise, we can go ahead and have Nikki start her presentation if we've lost Fortune. Thank you for bearing with us and communications. It looks like Fortune is back. Hi, Fortune. We just paused, hoping you come back. So go ahead and we can have you continue to share your screen and continue with the presentation. Thank you.
Alrighty. Sorry about that, guys. We almost made it all the way through it. Almost. I think I ended on, so respectful observers are always welcome. I love when people are there to genuinely learn, when they ask me questions that actually indicate that they care about the election process and that they care about being a resource for people in their lives for correct information. So at least, you know, I would say, and I would think that most clerks would agree that if you're there to genuinely learn, we are happy to have you. So this is going to be my shameless plug to be a poll worker. You probably will get that a lot when you talk to your clerks. So who, what, why, where, when, who, you. You must be an eligible voter in La Crosse County, and you must be able to read, write, and speak English. You cannot be a candidate on the ballot, and it is inappropriate for a spouse of a candidate on the ballot to serve as a poll worker. That is just a whole mess that we don't want to deal with. Become a poll worker. And the reason why is to serve and to learn, but also you can make a little side money because it is typically a paid position. We do have people in our community who genuinely just feel that is their civic duty and they refuse payment. But I would love to pay you to come and help your community. You have to live in La Crosse County, but you can serve anywhere in the county or you can serve in your community, whichever you prefer. I know that there are quite a few Town of Shelby residents who work in the city of La Crosse and they love it. They tell me all the time that they think it's great. Town of Shelby, we're a bit smaller. We have about 4,800 residents and about 3,300 voters. So sometimes we're a little bit of a ghost town, but as far as I know, most city of La Crosse places are one of the hottest spots in town on election day. And then when can you start? As soon as you complete the required training. La Crosse County, their clerk, Ginny, she does a really amazing job of training these people in and giving them just a really good foundation for the things that they're going to need to know to work election day. The things that they need to know about the process, the back end of, you know, what the clerk does and how things work. And I think she provides a really well-rounded training for everybody. So I would encourage, I don't host any trainings myself. I don't know if the larger municipalities do, but I would encourage you to reach out to your local clerk and then see if you're interested in doing that. Some really good resources for you are the Wisconsin Elections Commission website, which we talked about earlier, and then myvote.wi.gov. I'll talk about both of those a little bit more in just a minute here. The League of Women Voters, which are gracious hosts today. Thank you so much for hosting us for this information to get it out to the public. And then your local clerk. The reason that I have a little footnote behind the League of Women Voters and your local clerk is because we are all organizations just working in good faith to try and get information out to the public. However, if you've been involved with any process in the election, you know that they change some of the rules at the drop of a hat. And sometimes that's a little bit difficult to keep up with. So and we all have other things going on. Elections are not the only thing your local clerk is doing. And the League of Women Voters, I'm sure you're juggling a million things while also serving on this board and on this committee. So the Wisconsin Elections Commission and My Vote, all they do is elections all day long, 24/7. That's all they do. So they have the most up-to-date information. Myself and other clerks in your area and the League of Women Voters, I know we try and work day and night to try and get all the best information out there for you. But sometimes we're imperfect people and things get lost in translation. So I recommend .gov sites more than anything. Now, your local clerk might have a .com. My municipality has a .com website. So even I tell people that, you know, I recommend the .gov. Most municipalities are probably trying to get a .gov or at least a .org, so that people can have a little bit more faith in the information that they're getting. I won't say make an exception for your municipal clerk, because some communities probably don't even have a website, you know, so you have to just call and get the info. But we're all trying our best. Make sure that you have all of the information before you move forward, make a decision so that you can be an informed voter, and potentially just a resource for people around you who don't have access to the internet or maybe aren't as tech savvy. So this is the myvote.wi.gov that we talked about a little, or that I said I would talk about. This is really a hub for your info. Things like, if you just see, I'm going to highlight here, what's on your ballot specifically. You can update your name and address, register to vote absentee. You can track your ballot. So from the time you make a request to the time we send it out and the time we get it back and check it in, you can see what's happening with your ballot. You can find out where your voting in person places are. So we typically use our town hall. I don't know if that's the same for all the communities around us. I probably should know that, but you can find out all the information for yourself as a voter so that you can move forward. And then I just went ahead and highlighted down here that there are also most of those same options. And that is a really great resource for you as a voter for your information. If you're looking for information regarding just general, if you have questions about how something happens, you can view the election manual. You can find communications that they send to us clerks. You can sign up to be a poll worker. You can issue or you can have complaints and concerns that you have addressed by the actual Wisconsin Elections Commission at elections.wi.gov. So if you're looking for information specific to you, I would stick with my vote. But if you're looking for just general information, that is not Facebook, that is not, you know, America.org or whatever. This is a great website, and they, again, elections 24/7 is all they do. So the most up-to-date information should be on these websites. For your local clerks, I don't know who lives in which community, but I did include all of the ones in La Crosse County. I assume that's the only people who would be in this meeting. I'm not sure that there'd be anybody from like Monroe County or any of the other surrounding counties. If you're from Minnesota, you are definitely not in the right spot. So these are your clerks. I started with the cities, the county, the villages, and then on the next slide are the towns, the website and phone number for your municipality. And again, clerks are not perfect people. We're doing 100 different things. However, I would rather spend 5 minutes of my time answering your questions and making sure that you have the information you need to move forward as an informed voter, than have you, find some crazy website off of Facebook and have all the wrong information and, potentially struggle with the choice that you have to make for on your ballot. So contact your local clerks. If we don't know the answer, we probably know how to find the answer, or we know somebody who will, and we can get you in contact with like the county clerk or the Wisconsin Elections Commission. But again, just know your resources, talk to the people around you, and try to move forward with the best information that you can possibly get. And that's the end of my presentation. And we only had the one internet hiccup, so amazing.
Why don't we turn it over to Nikki? Nikki, thank you.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Good to go.
Okay. All right, so my piece in today's presentation will cover voting, accessibility, and election safeguards. First, on election day, your polling place is determined by where you live. Often in towns and villages, voting is most often in the town or village hall. In larger municipalities, and particularly those with multiple districts, voting locations are scattered throughout the municipality. So for example, in La Crosse, there are 13 aldermanic districts. We have a polling place that serves each district. And to break that down a little bit more, municipalities with populations over 35,000 are required to vote by voting ward. So districts are made up of voting wards, and this is how election results are reported. Even though in La Crosse we have 13 districts, we report by the 28 voting wards that make up our districts. So if you have not voted in 2022, your polling place may have changed since the last time you voted. With statewide redistricting in 2021, boundaries changed and citizens may have been moved into a different district and polling location depending on where you live. You can find your polling location by contacting your municipal court, or as Fortune had mentioned, visiting My Vote at myvote.wi.gov. Polls throughout Wisconsin are open 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Every person voting must show acceptable voter ID. The only exception to photo ID is for military voters, permanent overseas voters. Those are U.S. citizens residing outside of the country with no intent to return, and individuals that may register confidentially as victims of domestic abuse, sexual assault, or stalking. Voter ID proves who you are and must contain the person's name and photo. The name must conform. So for example, Robert and Bob, or Rebecca and Becky, those names conform. And the picture must reasonably resemble. So common forms of voter ID are a Wisconsin driver's license or state ID. And again, it does have to be Wisconsin, no other state. A passport, a military card, or a compliant college ID. Voter ID does not need to show the current address because again, at this point, it is who you are and not where you live. For those forms with an expiration date, it is not acceptable if expired prior to the November 2020 general election. So the forms that have expirations, those expirations are always based on the last general election. An individual not having an acceptable voter ID can get a free voter ID card from the Department of Motor Vehicles. And in August, the DMV did maintain longer hours in the days leading up to the election to assist individuals applying for a voter ID card. So I do expect they'll do that same in November. If a voter does not have an acceptable photo ID and is unable to get one before the polls close on election day, they may vote a provisional ballot. Provisional ballots are secured in an envelope. They're not processed through the tabulator on election day. Instead, they're secured and are added to the count only if the elector presents acceptable voter ID by 4 o'clock on Friday following the election. If they do that, the canvassing board then adds those vote counts, those ballot counts to the totals during the canvass. Polling places are required to be accessible to all individuals, including those with a disability. Polling places must have accessible parking, accessible pathways, and an accessible voting area. Every polling place is required to have at least one accessible voting machine and accessible voting booths, among other reasonable accommodations. Any individual needing assistance with voting may bring someone with them other than their employer or representative of their labor organization, or ask an election worker to assist. If a voter is unable to state their name and address, which is a requirement at the poll books, they have the right to have somebody state it for them. The accessible voting equipment at the polling places is called the Express Vote and allows individuals with disabilities or impairments to vote privately and independently. Curbside voting is available for individuals who, due to a disability or impairment, are unable to enter the polling place, and that includes being immunocompromised or having symptoms of COVID-19. With curbside voting, 2 election workers assist the person at their vehicle. And then individuals may choose to vote absentee. A person can either request an absentee ballot be mailed to them, or they can vote an in-person absentee ballot. For federal elections, clerks will begin mailing ballots for the November election no later than September 22nd. So already in a little over a week, we will begin mailing ballots for the upcoming November election. For federal elections, ballots are to be mailed no less than 47 days before the election. And then once that bulk mail goes out, ballots are mailed daily as requests are received. The last day to request an absentee ballot by mail is Thursday, November 3rd for regular voters and Friday, November 4th for indefinitely confined voters. But we do recommend requesting as early as possible to allow adequate mail time. To request an absentee ballot, a person can apply online at MyVote, via email to their clerk, or by sending a form United States Postal Mail, but clerks cannot accept those requests verbally. Anyone who votes absentee must also provide voter ID. Ballots must be returned no later than 8 p.m. on election day to be counted. Ballots can be returned by mail, and the municipality provides the return postage, or they can be delivered in person to the municipal clerk or to the respective polling place. With a recent court decision, voters may no longer use drop boxes as a means to return their absentee ballots, and they must be returned by the person who voted the ballot. There is one exception, there's actually a couple exceptions for returning a ballot by anyone other than the voter. One is if the voter is a hospitalized elector. And that is a person who within 7 days before an election is hospitalized and unable to get to the polls to cast a ballot. They appoint an agent, and the agent both delivers the ballot to the voter in the hospital and returns the voted ballot back to the clerk. There's required documentation for this process. So that is one exception for somebody other than the voter returning the ballot to the clerk. The other is delivering for an individual who has a disability. A recent court decision did confirm that the Federal Voter Right Act does allow assistance to voters with disabilities. When returning a ballot by mail, the post office recommends mailing the ballot back at least a week in advance. It's also required for the voter to sign or an assistant if necessary, and have a witness sign and provide their full address. Without those necessary requirements, a ballot may be rejected. Clerks do, however, attempt to contact the voter. And again, this is where it's very important to have a phone number or an email from the voter. If we don't have that locally, we will send them a letter or do whatever means we can do to contact that person, because if insufficiencies do go uncorrected, that ballot is not counted. Individuals residing in qualified care facilities such as nursing homes, community-based residential facilities, and retirement homes are served by special voting deputies. We call them SVDs for short, when those residents are voting absentee. By law, absentee ballots may not be mailed to residents of the qualified facilities. Instead, the SVDs deliver those ballots to the residents. They assist with voting as necessary and as needed, and return the ballots to the municipal clerk. SVDs are sworn election officials. A qualified facility means that there's at least 5 registered electors of the municipality who are occupants of the facility, and at least one of those occupants has requested an absentee ballot. Absentee voting may be conducted, absentee voting in the qualified facilities may be conducted no earlier than the 4th Monday before an election and no later than 5 p.m. on the Monday before the election. And then as soon as possible after arrangements are made with the facilities, but no less than 5 days before the visit, the clerk must post a notice at the facility indicating the date and time that absentee voting will occur, and that the notice must be provided to news media outlets and on the municipality's website. We do that so relatives know when those site visits will be, because relatives of occupants may be present in the room where the voting is conducted, and it's open to observers from each of the 2 major political parties. There's also in-person absentee voting, which is allowed during the 14-day period leading up to the election. The dates, times, and locations are determined by each municipality and may vary by election. For November, in-person absentee voting can begin on Tuesday, October 25th, and may go through Sunday, November 6th. However, most clerks end in-person absentee voting at 5 p.m. on Friday before the election, giving them time to print poll books, sort ballots, and prepare for Election Day. If you're interested in voting an in-person absentee ballot, please contact your local municipal clerk or visit their webpage for hours and locations. Voting can only occur during the published and posted hours. A notice of absentee voting hours is published in the local newspaper and will be on October 11th, and many clerks also post their hours on MyVote. Next, I'll touch on some of the ways that Wisconsin's election system is designed with checks and balances. It doesn't matter how a vote is cast, in person on election day or absentee. Election officials use a mix of technology, trained people, and practical safeguards to protect against errors and inaccuracies. So every machine is tested by municipal clerks within 10 days of each election. Predetermined test decks are created and processed through every piece of voting equipment. Results are then tabulated and compared to the predetermined counts to ensure the equipment is properly counting and tabulating. An errorless count is required. Any anomalies identified in testing must be remedied before the equipment can be used on election day. Following the public test, memory devices are secured in the voting equipment with tamper-evident seals. A chain of custody log is maintained, documenting any access to each memory device. And then a verification of those seals must take place before the polls open in the morning and after the polls close by the chief election officials. After each general election, Wisconsin statutes require post-election audits of voting systems. The audit is designed to assess the accuracy and performance of each voting system approved for use in the state. During this process, election officials conduct an independent hand count of paper ballots and compare the results to the election night voting results. The voter registration database, which we call WisVote, is a statewide system, meaning if somebody moves from, say, Madison to La Crosse, their voter record follows them and is updated as they update their address. Each individual only has one voter record. A person is tracked by that personal identifiable information, such as their date of birth, driver's license, or state ID number, or the last 4 of their social security. So if a duplicate record is created for the same person, the clerk receives an alert. And if we can determine that there is a match, those records are merged so that there was only one voter record. The voter registration database also talks to other state agencies for vital records and court records, and clerks are alerted when voters become ineligible. So for example, deceased voters or those ordered incompetent by a court or a convicted felon. In those instances, the record is deactivated. The database tracks every registration and ballot issued, helping ensure that only one ballot per registered voter is counted. All votes are counted securely at polling places on election day, including absentee ballots. Absentee ballots are securely delivered to the respective polling places and are counted in the same machines that count election day ballots. We have heard various misconceptions that absentee ballots are only counted when races are close, which is not true. Absentee ballots are always sent to the polling place on election day to be counted. Election inspectors confirm that the absentee ballots are sufficient, which means the voter is registered, the envelope has not been tampered with, and is properly signed and witnessed. If there are any insufficiencies, the ballot is rejected and the voter's record and list vote is updated accordingly. There is always a paper record of every vote cast. We use paper ballots that are hand marked by the voter. And then when using the express vote, it serves as a marking device, which prints a paper ballot that is tabulated with the hand marked ballots. In elections where contests are close, a recount can be ordered and ballots are hand counted and compared to the tabulator counts. In my tenure here, we have had several recounted contests which have never changed the outcome. In fact, one year we had a contest that resulted in a tie vote. A recount was ordered, and after the hand counting of the paper ballots, the recounted results were the same tie vote. And in that instance, the winning candidate was selected by random draw. So election results are triple checked. They're reviewed at the municipal level, they're double checked by the county, and they're certified by the state. Every part of the election process is transparent and open to observation, from the public testing to the in-person absentee voting, to the election day voting at the polls, to post-election canvass, audits, and recounts. Anyone can be an observer, and you do not have to be affiliated to any particular organization. The only exception to that is the voting in the qualified care facilities. In that instance, you do have to be from one of the two major political parties. Following election day, electors are given voter credit and voter participation is maintained in the individual voter record. So if a person were to vote 2 ballots, we would know and they would be turned over to the district attorney. Giving credit is a manual process. When voting either in person or by absentee, you are given a voter number. That number is recorded in the poll book next to your name. After the election, clerks go through the individual poll books and scan the barcode for every person that has a voter number. For most elections, this can be accomplished within a week or 2 following the election, but because of the high turnout expected in November, it may take several weeks. Clerks also have to reconcile all of the votes, meaning the numbers have to match for absentee voters, for election day voters, as well as any election day registrations, provisional voters, and so on. So voter credit may not show up in a voter's record for up to 30 days following an election. And then as I wrap up here, I just want to highlight a few things myself. On October 18th, I am hosting a voter education day at the Southside Neighborhood Center between the hours of 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. It's like an open house. People can drop by anytime. I will have both the DS200 tabulating unit and an express vote available for demonstration. I will also have information on all things voting and available to answer questions. And we'll also have staff available to assist with voter registration. And then most importantly, I would like to highlight election workers. Election workers have to be a resident of the county they serve. These people are your friends and your neighbors, and many of them are members of the League of Women Voters, and I thank you. They are committed to democracy and are working to ensure voting is open, fair, and transparent. They are not the lawmakers, but are trained and take an oath to ensure the rules are followed. When voting, please thank these individuals. Many of them are working 16+ hours, making sure that every eligible person is allowed to cast a ballot. So if you're interested in serving as an election worker, most clerks continue to recruit. And that is all I have. Thank you for your time and your interest in elections.
Well, thank you both, Nikki and Fortune. That really good information and really important information. I have a couple questions for you. The first question it has to do with absentee ballots. And, you know, I think the last big election we had, there might have been maybe a pandemic going on. And so I think that maybe people were considering absentee ballots more than what they might have in the past. And I was just curious, kind of what you see as the trend in terms of the percentage of people that are voting in person versus those that are voting absentee. And if you could comment on that from your perspectives.
I can take that one. We have definitely seen a downward trend since 2020. 2021, our absentees locally were still quite high. However, going into this November election, our absentees that we are mailing are down quite significantly since 2020 and 2021. We are seeing that more people are taking advantage of the in-person absentee hours, and then also are interested in returning to their polls on election day to vote.
Do you feel that there is a trust in the postal service delivery of absentee ballots? Do you think that's part of it, that people would rather go there and get the ballot from you and vote there rather than relying on the mail service?
I do believe some of that plays into it, yes. When they vote in person, it's not going through the postal system. They vote their ballot, they place it in an envelope, and it stays securely at the clerk's office until it's transported. In our case, until it's transported to the respective polling place on election day, which is done by our staff, which are sworn election officials. And then people are just, you know, there's still that group of people who enjoy going to their polling place and voting on election day. And people are feeling comfortable again doing that. So I just think those things together, are decreasing the number of absentees. And I do just want to put in one kudos, though, for the mail system. In August, we did have our local post office contact us 3 different times during the day on election day. There were ballots that were going through the mail system, and rather than send them up to Minneapolis and continue their journey through the mail system, they contacted us and said, we have ballots here, if you know, come and pick them up. And we were able to capture those ballots and get them to the polls by 8 o'clock. So that was an extra step that the post office made to ensure that those votes did count.
But that's outstanding. Could you guys clarify? So if you do get an absentee ballot at home, you now have to return it in person for yourself. Do you need to show an identification showing who you are when you return it in person, or can you just hand it to the clerk and walk away?
They do not have to show identification. The Wisconsin Election Commission did release some guidance as a result of the recent court decisions, which confirms that we do not have to ask for identification, but we should be asking a couple questions. One, are you the voter? If they say no, are you returning that ballot for a person, you know, with a disability? If they say yes, we ask one more question to confirm that they're not an employer or a representative of their labor union, because that's apparently some, you know, those individuals cannot return for a voter. if they say, no, I'm, returning this for my friend who does not have a disability, we are not allowed to accept that. But in no situation are we required to ask for identification.
Another question, when someone returns their absentee ballot, are you allowed to, before they turn it in, are you allowed to give it a quick look over and make sure it looks like it's all, good to go? Can you give advice to voters so that it doesn't somehow get discounted if perhaps the witness information is wrong or something like that? Do you feel comfortable that you can do something like that?
Absolutely. We locally, we do that. We instruct our poll workers to do that at the polling place, because not only do voters return the ballots to the municipal clerk, they can also return it to their respective polling place on election day. So both the staff at City Hall and election workers at polling places have been trained to give those envelopes a glance over to make sure that those required elements are there. And if they're not, then instruct the voter of their options for correcting that.
First, I thought you meant the ballot itself. I was like, no.
Did I vote for the right person?
So I was like, okay, sorry, I'm with you now.
No, it's okay. And I think the last question, and I'd be curious about both of your perspectives. Are you getting feedback from voters? Are they feeling comfortable voting? Do they feel like there's too many restrictions? Like what kind of feedback are you getting as clerks in terms of the security of our election and voters feeling like there's the right balance of security versus them having enough flexibility for voting that's convenient for them?
So we're getting a good mix of people who are really grateful and they trust the process, and then some people who have concerns and they do voice them. Typically I tell them, we review it at the municipal level, they review it at the county level, and then it's certified by the state, like Nikki had mentioned. So I tell them that these three processes are open to the public. Everybody who is handling these materials has gone through training. They've signed an oath, and then I explain to them that if you want to see more of what happens, it's open to the public. You should come observe, or you should volunteer to be a poll worker, so that you can see the process. So typically I give them as much information as I can without overwhelming them, and then I encourage them to get involved in the process.
And I would agree with Fortune on that. We have a mix of individuals who, complain about the different requirements in place. And recently that has been with regard to the returning of the ballots, and particularly the absentee ballot drop boxes, because we had 2 drop boxes right outside City Hall. People didn't have to get out of their cars. They were able to just drive right up and place them in there. So that's probably, I would say, the negative. That's what we're hearing the most complaint about, is return of the ballots. But it's just, it's reteaching people. It was something convenient that many folks were utilizing, and now it's just teaching them they can't. But I think, quite honestly, overall, I think locally we're very fortunate with people who participate in opportunities like this and do see all of the safeguards and the things. They're educated. They hear us talk and see all the great things that the league does in their outreach, and they believe and trust in the system.
Well, I think we'll end the questions, and I want to thank both of you. You play a critical role in our democracy, and you do so with the utmost of professionalism and proficiency. We're really lucky in this area to have local clerks throughout our community that make our elections safe, secure, and efficient. And every one of you deserves respect, recognition, and thanks for all you do. So thank you from the league. And on behalf of all of our members, we're just really grateful that you're in the jobs you're in, and that we have a very, very effective election process here in the state. So thank you. I also want to just make a brief comment of thanks to Deb Luchin, who is our new program committee chair and our vice president, for getting us off to a great start for our program season, and for Mary Nugent, who's our past president. But Mary has graciously agreed to help us with our programs in terms of the technology and spotlighting and setting them up. And so we're really, really, grateful for Mary. It takes a village to pull these together, and I think it's great to be able to have folks willing to volunteer to help us do that. I think that volunteers all play a critical role in our league success, and from our voter services committee, for program committee, to our communications committee, to our membership and inclusion committee, and our board of directors, your hard work and continued dedication to elections and to the league really make a difference. So if anybody out there is interested in being part of our team, go to our website, hit the contact us button, and tell us what you're interested in helping with. We'd love to have you or talk with you some more. Mary, I think our next slide is coming up. The October Lunch and Learn will be Tuesday, October 11th. It's on a continuing focus on elections, but this is empowering the vote, and we'll have information, more detailed information on voting for special groups. And I think specifically college student voting for persons with disabilities and voting from the jail. And I thank Chris again and her voter services team for pulling that together. I hope you all enjoy the next month. Get outside and contact your election officials. Make sure you're registered. Please, please, please help out at the poll if you want to be an election worker. They'd love to have you, as you've heard it. And we thank you for joining us. So take care. We'll see you in October. Thanks, everybody.